From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and we've got an awesome guest here for episode 22. This show is brought to you by the good folks at Lumberland Baseball. They make the Bat Mug, which is a perfect gift for any player, coach, parent, or diehard fan. With the Bat Mug, they've hollowed out the barrel of the bat and created a mug that holds 12 ounces of hot or cold beverages. They also have new 16 and 22 ounce offerings that have become very popular as well. You can customize these with names, colors, text, logos, photographs, and really create a unique personalized gift or souvenir. I've given these away several times myself as gifts, and they're always a hit. They're officially licensed product of the Major League Baseball Players Association as well, so they have designs available for every player and team. Drink straight from the barrel all year long with the Lumberland Bat Mug, which is the official mug of America's pastime. They're 100% handmade in the U.S., and you can design them exactly however you'd like. Customize yours today and get 10% off your order when you enter the coupon code Cressey, C-R-E-S-S-E-Y at checkout. Just head to lumberlend.com. Again, that's LUMBERLEND.com and design your bat mug today. Use the coupon code Cressey to get 10% off. Today's guest is a starting pitcher for the Atlanta Braves. He grew up in Calgary and was drafted 28th overall in the 2015 Major League Baseball draft. He quickly moved through the minor leagues and made his major league debut at age 20 in 2018. At the time of his debut in 2019, he was the youngest pitcher in the National League and went on to be selected to the National League All-Star team in 2019. Between 2018 and 2019, he set a Major League Baseball rookie record with 8 consecutive starts with 1 earned run or fewer allowed. He met up with CSP this past offseason as he came back from a shoulder injury, and we're excited to welcome to the show Mike Soroka. All right, welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me. It's fun. I've listened to a few, and you sound like a real natural on here.
I'm trying. And, it's funny. I feel like we've probably had about 50 conversations over the course of maybe the past 10 months, throughout off season that would have made great podcasts. And if we had recorded them, it would have been great. And instead, they just became like things that I'm learning from a 20/21-year-old. So, I want to ask you some questions. So what I think is really interesting about you is not just that you got to the big leagues really, really quickly, or, that you're thriving the way you are at age 21. But I'm also, pretty sure that a lot of people don't realize that you were, a guy that started in Canada. You were a hockey player, right?
Yeah, I was until I was about 13 or 14.
So talk to me a little about like baseball in Canada. Like what makes a kid from Calgary, into a first day pick in the draft, and also speak to kind of like the challenges of weather in Canada. Like, was that a blessing? Was it a burden? How did you view it?
Yeah, honestly, I think it was kind of a blessing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Hockey was something for me that I always loved when I was a kid. But once it got pretty serious when, you're 10, 11, 12, which is the way baseball is down in the southern states,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that pressure playing baseball that a lot of kids did. And not to say I did in hockey, but it was kind of one of those situations where if you wanted to be good, you had to be at the rink every day. You didn't have a choice. I couldn't play school sports anymore. I couldn't do any of that. It was all hockey. And I still love the sport, but I just didn't love the practice. I didn't love to be there every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of found with baseball is that I never got that way. I never got to the point where I didn't want to go to practice.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was, a fielding conditioning practice, I was excited to go. No matter what it was with baseball, I was happy. And so I kind of just took that route, and we're lucky with a couple of big indoor facilities in Calgary. Got to know those owners pretty well, and spent a lot of time inside just
Mm-hmm.
screwing around, really. Whether it was at the cages, throwing bullpens into a net,
Mm-hmm.
little things like that just go a long ways when it goes into just having fun with it.
Absolutely.
So, mean, we're lucky as well with the national team program. Baseball Canada does a really, really good job of identifying from the provincial programs, and then also making sure that guys get opportunities to be seen. I was lucky to be able to come down with the junior team and pitch against professional talent when I was 16.
Yep.
I got my brains beat in. You're completely overmatched.
Mm-hmm.
I was 16 years old throwing low mid 80s. And yeah, I got hit hard. And that's kind of that was that first time that I'd ever been in that situation to where I'm totally overmatched. And it kind of gave me a good perspective of how far it is to go,
Yeah.
So I think over the next couple of years, obviously velo went up about 10 miles an hour, which made it a little easier, but I found I hit that learning curve for pitching a little earlier than a lot of kids would have.
Yeah. Do you find? Give me a thought when you were that 16-year-old pitching in the low 80s. What was your frame like compared to what it is now?
Yeah, I think I just grew in height.
Yeah.
I think entering the 9th grade, I was about 5'6", 160 pounds. And I actually lost weight when I grew. I grew about 8 inches that year, and I ended up about 6'2", about 140 pounds, real lanky. Really uncoordinated when it came to my feet. I was always fairly coordinated with my hands, hand-eye, and stuff like that. But no, it was an ugly sight for a while on the athletic terms.
Yeah.
But it's just once that happened, and I realized, wow, I got to throw harder. Then lots of food, the eat everything program, and get in the weight room. That's when I first kind of got in there, and we were with a football coach. But at that point, that setting a base is what needs to happen when you're, whatever I was, 15 years old, and managed to set a really good base.
Exactly. And I don't think athletes appreciate that, like how much just sheer calories it takes when you're 6'2", 140 to put on, you're well over 200 pounds now, like to actually put that 70 plus pounds on. There's just a lot of nutrition that needs to go into that. And I think we often hear, like high school kids say, I eat all the time, I eat so much. And then you actually like see it, or you have them write it down on paper, and it's not nearly that much, but it takes a lot of sustenance to get to that point.
Yeah, 100%. And I think knowing what I know now, I would have done it a little differently as far as food timing and all that kind of things. But yeah, it was little things like the fads of trying to wake up at 2 a.m. and put down a protein shake and go back to sleep. Little things like that I did just because it was, it was something that I really needed to do. And even jokingly got made fun of at school for carrying around one of those big lunch boxes. And I was eating in every single class, no matter what it was, whether it was PB&J or fruit snacks or whatever. It was anything I could eat, I was eating. So, that was kind of fun because I could kind of eat everything.
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry. I could stop at our drive-in spot on the way home from our lifts and have 2 triple burgers and not worry about it. So it's a little different focus now, but no, it was incredible.
Well, I think we also live in an era where, I think social media does this. You always kind of like, you can put any Instagram filter on to put your best foot forward and all this. And what we realize is there's a lot of kids out there who never have to embrace challenges or failure, right? Like you talked about the benefits of going and getting hit around against, professional caliber players when you traveled south with Team Canada. You talked about like embracing the challenge of crushing calories. And I even know like, kind of when we first connected after your shoulder injury last year, like you embraced that injury as a learning experience. Has that growth mindset, has that always been you? Was that something that you feel like you've acquired? How did that come about?
Yeah, I don't know. That's actually a good one. To me, I think it was being able to look at reality. And part of that was my dad being able to kind of look at things and say, this is no longer working. So try something else,
Yeah.
And one of those things was, it was being in the weight room and putting on weight and putting on size. I worked for a lot of years when I was 15 to 18 when I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
But then after a certain point, it wasn't helping me on the mound anymore. And ultimately, at the end of the day, my job is to throw zeros. So
Yeah.
it didn't matter what I was doing in the weight room. If it was hurting me on the mound, then it wasn't worth it. So a lot of those things, yeah, like nutrition and injury, you learn what you can and cannot do. So I feel like just for me, if I wasn't moving in the right direction, then it was all wasted time.
Absolutely. So here's a question for you. So you were a big leaguer at 20. That's insanely fast. Obviously, in that 2015 draft, you were the 5th high school pitcher taken, the first to the big leagues. You were the 14th high school player taken overall, and also the first to the big leagues. I was just ahead of guys like Colby Allard and Josh Naylor and Kyle Tucker. So I'm curious to get your take. What made you a big leaguer so quickly? I'm sure it's multifactorial, but what in your mind stands out the most?
Yeah, obviously, first I was thankful to be in an organization that pushed us.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of those guys that made it quickly are with the Braves.
Yeah.
And a lot of that goes into them being in a rebuild. And obviously just giving us the reality that, if you pitch and you can compete at that level, you're gonna do that. We don't check IDs. We don't hold guys back for their first season just because. There was no traditions like that. And I think that helped us a lot in the confidence department to say, all right, go out there. That ball's yours. You're going to be given 100 pitches and go show what you can do. So I feel like just kind of being able to let go and play the game was big for us. But and the competition. At first you look around and you see all the high picks, all the other bonus babies. I mean, we were full of them from trades and all that kind of stuff. And then we had a couple of thick drafts for a couple of years. And you look at the upper levels of our minor leagues right now, and it's stacked. So I feel like at first you look at that and you see, wow, do I really have a shot here? And then you kind of say, this is the way it is. And if I'm going to compete and I'm going to push through it, this is ultimately going to make me better because it's going to bring out the best in all of us.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that's one thing that's pushed me, and I have never hit that point that I've arrived, because there's always been someone next to me working as hard or harder to be at the same or a better level.
That's awesome. Never get comfortable. What about the actual, the skill of baseball? Is it something, is it fastball command? Is it the ability to effectively command 4 different pitches at a high level? What do you think differentiates you and, has made you successful, not just to get to the big leagues, but obviously to put up some special numbers that made you an all-star at 21?
Yeah, I think everybody's going to say fastball command. But to me, that's come a long ways in the last couple of years. I've always been able to throw strikes, but throwing strikes doesn't necessarily get outs. It was just having a better idea of what you're doing, 0-0 versus 0-2 versus 2-1. And, for me, limiting damage this year was massive with being able to put a ball on a corner 2-1. To where you either get that no swing or the weak contact. If you're always challenging, and you do sometimes, you have to do that. But if you're always hopping in there, 2-0, here it is, hit it. The guys, like right now, Anthony Rendon's going to hit that ball. He's going to hit that ball out. Freddie Freeman's going to hit that ball hard. That happens more often than not. So just realizing how much of a difference that makes just to be able to have an idea of the zone and being able to have smaller misses. That's gone a long ways for me. And without that, nothing else would matter.
Absolutely. Speaking to the delivery, I'm always intrigued about, various deliveries. And, I put up an Instagram post a while back of the guys throwing this past offseason where you had Brad Hand and Steve Cishek side by side with the most, probably 175 combined, big league saves and completely different. And to be honest, I probably could have thrown your delivery in there as well in the way that it's obviously unique. Pitching's all about putting yourself in the right positions and, effectively leveraging gravity to throw downhill. And I think there are a lot of people that would look at your delivery and say that it's I don't know, maybe high maintenance because you have a little bit of kind of like a backward lean that effectively takes you away from the plate, but it's super repeatable. It tunnels well. You throw a bunch of different pitches at, elite velocities. I'm curious, what would your response to be that? And how many coaches have tried to coach, that level of different out of you over the years?
Yeah, I think coming up in Little League right away, I was told that my arm angle was too low. It was too low. It was too low. And, obviously from throwing from the outfield and little things like that, yeah, you want to get on top. You want to be able to backspin the ball. But that's just never where it felt comfortable. But I was lucky to be able to be with a couple pitching coaches that have been there before. Jim Lawson being one of them. He pitched in the Oakland Athletics organization, and then Chris Rietzma, another one who was a 7 or 8 year big leaguer. And to be able to understand that a unique delivery is also deception, and you need some of that in the big leagues to be able to get outs consistently, because you're going to have days when your stuff's not there. What's going to get you through is a little deception and difference. Because ultimately, if you're Iron Mike out there and they see the ball, it doesn't matter how hard, where you put it, it's going to get teed off on. So, I'm thankful that I was allowed to be my own person and kind of be able to figure things out on my own. And have small cues like, you need to be able to load your backside a little more, stay over the rubber, the typical pitching cues like that. But I was never sat in front of anything to make, this is how your arm action should look. You got to change this and that. It was never like that, because ultimately it's not going to be the same if it's not comfortable to you. So, you get asked all the time, and I'm sure a lot of other guys do with different pitches. And it's like, how does your sinker do that? What do you throw? And it's a traditional 2-seam fastball. That's exactly what I throw. And then I feel like what makes it move is just its natural spin axis and angle that it comes out of my hand. One thing that I do not have is extension. When we look at TrackMan, that's way down when you're talking about the averages, but that also means that I'm releasing the ball at a higher, higher angle. And it's what allows me for my arm speed to be, you get that quick snap from behind my ear. And that's why when I hear, what do these guys see? And they just don't quite seem to be able to pick it up when I'm staying closed, when I'm on my backside. And that's, to me, what's most important.
And you kind of like hinted at, I call it a Brian Kaplan-ism. He talks about don't coach the different out of somebody. It's whatever, you're like a unique casserole of a lot of different factors that make you successful. But with that said, are there specific checkpoints that you look for in your delivery, right? Whether it's feeling them in real time, in the bullpen before a game, or if you've had a tough outing and you go back out and you watch a video, are there pitfalls that you get into that you identify, or is it something that it could be, something different each time out?
Yeah, I have a couple of big ones. And one of them was said another way in another one of your podcasts with Blake Trinan, was not rushing to create arm speed, meaning that, that front foot's got to get down before you accelerate towards the plate. That was always big for me, because, I'd be nice and smooth in the bullpen because I wouldn't be rushed. I wouldn't be trying so hard to throw hard and make pitches. And I get out there in the first, and I'd be jumping towards the plate. I'd be too excited to throw the baseball. So for me to be able to kind of take a deep breath, relax, let myself load into my back leg, and let that front foot get down before I accelerate, that's everything for me. And a lot of it goes off feel too. So if I get, 2 straight misses down and away with a fastball, glove side, likely flying open. With the same thing with a sinker down and into a righty, I really got to stay on that backside to make sure I'm closed, to kind of drive it in there as opposed to whip it in there or throw it in there. And these are just small little feel terminologies that I've come up with to be able to kind of cue myself into my delivery.
Well, I think it's huge. I remember talking to Kurt Schilling back in like 2009, I bet it was, and he was speaking to some of our minor league guys, and he talked a lot about like, hey, don't be that guy that needs to figure it out between starts or after you've given up, a 6 spot in the first inning. You need to figure it out after like the first fastball that you left, middle that got pounded. Like you
Yeah.
need to be able to correct on the fly. Is that something that's changed for you? Like, have you done that well, like throughout your career, or is it something where you really needed to struggle to have to come up with those strategies on the fly?
Yeah, the struggle is where you learn everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's kind of cliche, but
Yeah.
if you don't have those bad innings where everything goes wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it's just experience,
Yeah.
and being able to be in those situations and learn from them. But yeah, definitely. Instead of having 2 bad outings in a row where you can't figure it out, maybe you have a bad inning or a bad couple of batters, and you nip it in the butt right there.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes an elite pitcher and so consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Because the best in the game have those innings where they just can't seem to kind of find it, but they snap it into place in their next inning, or it's right away.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you learn. That's something that you're being able to cue. And for me, it's not necessarily all mechanics based. It's what I'm trying to do in my head.
Mm-hmm.
If I get frustrated with giving up too many bloopers and too many ground balls through the hole, I try and do everything myself, and I'm trying to be too perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of them are mental adjustments, and I know that's kind of hard to think because there's no real way of explaining what that does for you mechanically.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it frees me up, and if I'm in the right mental state of mind, every pitch, regardless of what's happening behind me, I'm going to execute a good pitch.
Absolutely. And you spoke to the 2-seam like a little bit, and you're a 2-seam slider, changeup, and 4-seam guy. And you're at 21, you're throwing righty on righty changeups. You're throwing all 4 of those pitches in full counts. Like there's obviously an ability to manipulate the baseball at a high level. Was that something you've always had? Like was the movement, of all of those pitches, or I guess the profile of all those pitches, was it that good in high school, or was it something that really optimized when you had better access to, all of the analytic stuff, a lot of the video stuff, and just feedback from better hitters? Like, or was it natural for you?
I think as far as the sinker goes, it was fairly natural.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely little tweaks that I've made, such as angle and release point was one big one for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I get down, I get on the side of it, it
Yeah.
becomes just more of a traditional 2-seam, and I tend to leave that over the plate and it gets hit. But
Mm-hmm.
the one that I've always had was my breaking ball, actually.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, I came up with it, and it was big, kind of a sideways curveball. It
Okay.
was 78 to 81.
Mm-hmm.
I never had a problem spinning it, but the problem was always spin axis.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually something that I've been able to tweak in the last year or so, to be able to alter my grip just a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
And all it was rotating the baseball in my hand
Mm-hmm.
on the grip to be able to put it in the best situation or best axis possible to spin down.
Okay.
Because ideally, I don't really have one breaking ball that's my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
We pick a couple different ones depending on the hitter. Some hitters are they're better at seeing the one that's a little smaller and a little more side to side, but they can't hit the one that goes straight down.
Yep.
So those are little things that I guess I've been able to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I credit those to messing around with wiffle balls.
That was that was my next question.
Yeah. I mean,
When did it
there's
start?
nothing wrong with that. I know some people will be afraid of that. It's probably, they say, oh, not good, you're going to mess things up. But really, everything it does, and the one I loved was a blitz ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it because it amplifies everything that you're doing in your delivery.
Mm-hmm.
If you're really on top of it and you get through it, you get that angle and rise
Mm-hmm.
that we get from some of our quote rise ball guys, the Craig Kimbrell action.
Yeah.
And then it goes the same way with sliders and curveballs.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you exactly what you're doing on a bigger scale, and and you just mess around with it and find it.
Yeah.
So I guess I always understood how to make the ball move a certain way, probably thanks because of that.
Yeah, and that really, to be honest, it parallels a lot of what Adam Ottavino said on an earlier podcast, where he talks about always like playing games of how to spin a curveball when he was younger with his dad. It wasn't go out and throw 50 of them in a game. It was a lot of like, and he's a Northeastern guy too, so he was doing this in New York City growing up, and we have a podcast on when kids should throw curveballs. That's one of our popular ones, and the gist is that they're really not any more stressful when thrown correctly than a fastball or any other pitch. So definitely worth playing around if you have a more advanced delivery at a young age. And it sounds like that was something that you had sorted out and were a good fit for.
Yeah, 100%. It was, like I said, that was always fun for me to be able to see the ball move. I used to take our recycling bin outside, put it in the backyard, and throw wiffle balls and tennis balls at it, pretend it was a strike zone or a batter. That was always my fun with pitching. So to be able to understand how a ball moves and how you spin a baseball, that was massive for me. And I didn't realize at the time. I didn't do it with the mind frame of getting better. I didn't do it as a just because I had to. I did it because that was fun to me, and that's what I wanted to do.
That's interesting. So there was a great podcast Tim Ferriss did with Maria Sharapova, and Sharapova talked about being this, really, really talented tennis player at ages 4 or 5. And she actually talks about how one of the things that she thinks set her up for failure is that she didn't mind the boredom because she appreciated it. She could tolerate hitting a ball against the wall for hours and hours because to her it was fun. It sounds like there's a little bit of that. Like there are a lot of like really high caliber athletes and pitchers out there who spend a lot of time throwing a ball against a wall or into a bucket or, playing catch by themselves effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And I did that with hockey too. I was a goalie, so I never got a chance to put this into use, but my dad left the basement unfinished, and we had a hockey net down there, and I used to have pucks down there, and I would, shoot. I would shoot all day. So whenever it came around to being able to play out one day a year, I was always kind of surprising people that I had a decent shot. But it was little things like that. Like I said, I will always do that, and I even get made fun of today on our team because if it was up to me, I would hit BP every single day, and I will hit 5 or 6 rounds of it because I love it.
Absolutely.
I will hit tee. I will do soft toss. I will do everything in preparation for that. Because for me right now, that's the most fun part about my day after throwing. What else do I have to do? I have to obviously get in the weight room or do my recovery stuff, but I get to hit BP today.
You can't beat that.
And no, exactly. And it's little things, I never dreaded PFP work, because I always tried to be an athlete with it. When you're flipping double plays, when you realize how big that becomes in a game, why not try and make it game speed and have fun with yourself out there? That was always easy for me. So I feel like that transferred really quickly.
Absolutely. So here's a question for you. You talked about, kind of what makes a good, turbo sinker, when you're basically in better positions to command the 2-seam and to do what you want with it. Does your approach change dramatically when you go from that 2-seam to the 4-seam where, the intentions, the spin rate are different, or for you is a fastball?
They're slightly different. I just kind of some cues that I'm trying to make sure I do a little better. Both of them, I'm really trying to get off my index finger. So I know a lot of people think that you're putting pressure on your middle finger. You're trying to get it off the inside of your middle finger to make it spin sideways. But for me, I'm not driving the baseball with either of them if they're coming off my middle finger. It means I'm coming off a little early, and I'm not really reaching to that last part. So for me, depending on where I'm going with it, it changes as well. If I'm 0-0, I'm trying to get one in there, I might look towards the middle of the plate and try and get on top of something to make sure whether I miss over the plate or on the corner that the ball is moving downwards. you're rarely going to get hurt too badly if you're over the plate but the ball's moving down. Where you get hurt is even if I was to throw it in the middle of the plate and it rode out to the side, because that's when the lefties are going to feast on that ball out over the plate all day. But for four seam for me this year, that's something that I worked on with Cap, and being able to kind of look at things on Rapsodo and look at release point. Like I said, for any of my pitches, I don't think I've ever had an issue spinning the baseball. And a lot of people think that a sinker is always a low spin pitch. But I had never had a problem spinning the four seam fastball, but it always ended up on a tilted axis. So it didn't quite get that ride that I was looking for. So to be able to try and kind of emulate that spin, try and get behind it a little better, has actually been able to take off for me and separate the two.
Absolutely.
You look at so many of the good pitchers now today, they have two pitches that look exactly the same or more, and they separate. So if I can throw two fastballs at similar velocities, the four seam's a little harder, but essentially one goes the complete other direction. That's when it gets really tough for hitters, because now they can't just sit on with speed. They kind of have to pick a location as well.
Absolutely. So this is interesting. It actually leads in my next question. So last year, your agent, Mark Pieper, put us in touch. That was probably June or so. I'm trying to remember the exact timeline. But so you reached out. We texted, talked, emailed back and forth. And I sent you my Sturdy Shoulders product. And then we met up, I want to say, in August or so. Down in Florida while you were doing your rehab in Orlando. And what was interesting is you rolled in and you had gone through all 7+ hours of that product. You had taken notes and you rolled in. I remember you were like, I think I figured out a lot of my own stuff, but it'll be good for you to verify it. Like, you had already gotten to work. So 21-year-olds don't do that, right? Most 21-year-olds out here, like, you're begging them to get out of bed in time to be on time to whatever they're going to do. You know what I mean? They're procrastinating all these appointments, that they have, whether they're, meetings with coaches or, school assignments in college. And here you are, like, blowing products out of the water that are probably more intended for athletic trainers that are 20 years older than you and have a formal background in this. And then, so building on that, like, when we first met up this offseason, you basically gave me like a true media tutorial. Like, that thing inside and out on another level. Like, you could teach a college course on it. So, like, if you're, how are you this well versed on the analytics side of the game at such a young age? Is that a curiosity that you've always had? Did it evolve because of the organization you were in and recognizing what a difference that stuff has made for your success?
Well, first, I wouldn't say I understood absolutely everything that was taught in the Sturdy Shoulder Solutions, but it's a curiosity, and I've always kind of had that to something that I wanted to know more of. I hate sitting there, and I'm that person at dinner when we're talking about something. Well, I thought it was this, or I'm searching that up. I'm looking it up on Google right away. And I just can't go without knowing something. So for me, when something's talked about as much as it is today, like, analytics or injuries, I want to know more. And, one of the things to me when I got sent down to rehab last year was, why I was hurt, because essentially a subscap injury is, not something that you see from younger pitchers, and especially younger pitchers that didn't throw a ton when they were young. It's more of an older veteran injury. I know John Smoltz had trouble with it later in his career. But to me, that was troubling. I said, okay, well, why do I have this? If I really only have X amount of innings under my belt and I'm 20 years old. So a lot of it was wanting to know what was causing it. And I couldn't be that person that gets the diagnosis as a traditional, it's shoulder impingement, and that's not what they said. Once it came around, it was, okay, this is what it is. But I couldn't be that person just to take the diagnosis and blindly do my rehab work, because ultimately, if you're not committed into what you're doing, you're not going to do a good job doing it.
Yeah, you want to be an advocate for yourself,
Yeah, and that's what it went into once I understood exactly how I was doing. And credit to our medical staff. Everything in my rehab was on par. I mean, it was perfect, but that's what allowed me to show up every single day and be completely invested in what I was doing that day. And that goes into a lot of other things, whether it's recovery work now, weight room work. Being completely committed to what I'm doing that day has been amazing in keeping me healthy and be refreshed.
Yeah.
I never feel like I'm showing up to do some eye wash. It's always purposeful, and that goes in analytics as well. When I had some time down, I got a chance to really look into True Media and narrow in some whatever. If it was I want to go look at Max Scherzer's pitches, I want to go see what this spin axis or spin was on these pitches and what makes it so different and so good. I could do that on him, Sale, whoever you want, and that was a lot of fun for essentially just wasting time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say one of the things you need after a long-term rehab is to find a hobby. So if that's a way to distract you and keep the time going fast, it definitely helps. So here's a question. I know that you did an interview a while back about just like how your approach to different pitches had changed when you went from lower level to minor leagues to the big league baseball. It was one of the more like impressive interviews I've ever seen. You could talk about everything that changed on each one. How have you evolved on the whole since going to the big leagues? What were the biggest adjustments, that you see, given that you started the year in AAA this year and spent time there last year? How is AAA different from the big leagues as a pitcher?
Well, now that they have the big league ball in AAA,
yeah, it's true. Good point.
It's not too much different anymore.
Yeah, there's lots of homers in both places.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you got to realize, and some guys struggle with in AAA, is that a lot of those guys there have spent a lot of time in the big leagues, and they're still very good lineups. And I think that gets lost sometimes as people assume that AAA is this completely inferior level to the big leagues. Which it is a different beast. But you really got to do your job when you only have 1,000 people in the stands on a Wednesday in AAA, to be able to come with your best stuff. But as far as what adjustments I made to be where I am today, I think the biggest one I made was in AA. I was very lucky. Our pitching coach, who's now our minor league pitching coordinator, Derek Lewis, kind of set me a little straighter onto who I am and who I could be. Obviously, with having a sinker and being primarily a sinker guy, you get that label as, just a sinker guy. And traditionally, that's a guy that doesn't throw all that hard. You're putting the ball at the bottom of the zone and you're pitching to contact. And that's never something that I was always happy doing. I didn't have fun, giving in. So I think a lot of the adjustments that I made were realizing that, my sinker is probably my best pitch, but it doesn't mean my other three aren't good. If I can do what I can with those other three to make the sinker a weapon, and kind of a surprise when it comes out, that's going to be where my strength is. So separating the four seam and the sinker were huge. Refining slider, changeup, and consistency with those two pitches were really completing me. And to be a complete pitcher in the big leagues is somebody that obviously you're handling things like the running game and all that kind of stuff a little differently. But to be complete is to be able to do things a little unconventionally. You look at pitch selection from some of the best, and there's no rhyme or reason for a lot of it. You can't sit there and call the pitches from your couch, because they're doing what they know how to do and what they want to do with the hitter.
Absolutely.
We watched Nola the other day, and he was on for the better part of the game, and he has no problem throwing his curveball, strike or ball in any count. Where he wants to, and backdoor his two seam and let his four seam ride. It makes it so hard when that person's not falling into a pattern with 2-1 fastballs.
And that's what Miles Michaelis talked about.
Yeah. You're always throwing a 1-1 off speed,
Yeah. And I think there's something he said too. I think Miles said something to the effect of, he's like, we have advanced analytics and everything like that, but there's no analytic that can tell me what goes through a batter's head when he's down 0-1.
Yep.
It just changes the context of the game. So, all right. So the more big picture, talking a little bit about your in-season throwing and training programs on a 5-day rotation, because there are a lot of guys that really struggle going from high school 7-day rotations or college 7-day rotations and going to that 5-day. And you seem to have handled it, really, really well. How do you attack your 5? So the second the game ends, what are you going to?
Yeah, so this is something that I've worked with over the last 3-4 years and really tinkered with. I've gone through periods where I've done a ton of work and then periods where I decided that I wasn't going to do much of anything. And for right now, right after the game's done, I hop in there and immediately it's kind of, all right, I got to get some food in because I haven't eaten much all day. I can't really seem to do that on start day. But for me, it's getting the weight room. And it's not exactly a completely taxing lift. It's what you'd call more of a GPP, more of a maintenance lift. But it's everything that we can do. We get squats and lunges and, we get our upward rotation stuff and stuff to open me up on a shoulder perspective. So finding out little things that I did this off season to find out that, okay, I don't have to beat up my cuff with shoulder work after I throw because I'm naturally getting tighter because of throwing. So altering my arm care to where I am now opening myself up and doing more stretching for arm care than anything else. Stretching and activation as opposed to strengthening. That's what changed for me. But being able to lift on the day of, for me, it has been easy because I'm hyped up after the game. I'm still running high. I'm still hot. I'm still warm. My joints still feel great. I don't have to get them going or anything. So I can hop right under the squat bar and I'll be all right. So the next day for me I've been able to do a complete recovery day, and it doesn't mean that I don't do that I'm not doing anything, but it means that everything I do has been pushed around, stretching, opening up again, and then doing whatever's available to me. We're really lucky in the big leagues when we have a ton of options. You have things like the hyperbaric chamber, and we have the blood flow restriction machines for the bike and little things like that to make recovery that much easier. But one thing that I've gotten into this year has been our dry heat sauna, as well as cold and hot tub contrast. And so my day after has been completely shut it down, stretch and kind of regain form for bullpen day, so you can make use of that next day. So going into that next day, bullpen day, and that's more.
And you don't throw it all on day one, right? You're off completely. Or you
no, sorry, I play catch. I play catch.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's more lighter, even if it's out to 120, 150 feet.
Yeah.
It's light. It's easy. It's focus on your mechanics. Maybe get something out that you felt last night that you wanted to iron out today because it's still fresh in your mind.
Yep.
So a little light throwing, but still with intent. I try to make every throw count as much as possible, even on your low days. But next day, bullpen day, and I'm more of a lighter bullpen usually. I might ramp it up near the end a little bit, but it's more of a work capacity day to kind of emulate that you're in that game for 6-7 innings. So as you get warm, get the bullpen in, then they go right to our cut sprints. However many we've decided based on where we are in the season, our 3-4 week program that we kind of go up and down, take a deload if we need to, but sprints right after, and then we go in to the weight room, and it's much more of, like I said, work capacity. It'll be 5-10 minutes of hurdle work, and then 5 minutes on the bike, and then 5 minutes med ball work, sled pushes, little things like that, just to get you moving. Just to keep your heart rate up for, I guess it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours of work when all is said and done. And then finish with some cars work, lots of lots of things to open me up, stretch me again. I'm finding that that's something that I need to stay on top of, as opposed to a lot of strength work. So get on top of that. And then day 3 is very similar to day 1. It's another just rest and recovery day, another light catch day. Take it easy because, I've come to learn that it is a long season and being healthy is everything. So if it means taking it a little easier on a couple days between starts, that's just what I'm going to have to do. So easy on that 3rd day, and then 4th day before playing catch, it's a little flat ground. Maybe I'll get on the mound for a touch feel, throw a couple, just to get the feel, and then sprint work. And if we're taking BP, I'll take BP. But if not, we'll get in there. Maybe do a couple other mapping things, a couple other balance drills, little things like that, just to get you kind of fired up. And then day 5 pitch.
That's where it's the really good message there is finding highs and lows over your 5-day cycle, right? So day 0 is a high, day 1's a low, day 2 is a high, day 3 is a low, and then day 4 is kind of a like whatever it needs to be. If I'm dragging, I can make it low key. If I'm feeling really good, maybe I can sprint a little bit more. And I think what we've traditionally seen is we've seen a lot of guys who go out and throw and beat themselves up on day 0. Then day 1, they dig the hole even deeper with a crazy lift. Day 2, they throw a bullpen and then they run gassers. And then they keep digging the hole deeper and deeper, and they get to day 4 and they're just trying to get out of it. I love the idea of fluctuating. It's something we used a lot. Kluber's done some similar stuff in the past to consolidate it. So, people poo-poo on lifting right after a start, but when you look at like a classic high-low model, it's a great way to consolidate stress. Lance Lynn's done it in the past as well. So there are guys that are definitely testing the waters, and some guys you don't like it, but you just got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, and one thing for me, like you said with the high-low, when I'm on the mound and I'm out there, my body has not felt taxed when it comes to 6th, 7th inning. Okay, yeah, your arm's going to feel tired. Your arm's the one that's always working. But as far as legs go, I haven't had a problem with keeping my legs under me the whole game. Especially as a National League pitcher, when you're on the base sometimes, you're on the base fast for sometimes 20 minutes. Dallas had a hit the other night in leadoff and ended up being out there for half an hour. You need some level of conditioning to be able to hop right back out on the mound and execute your pitch.
Absolutely.
For me, the high-low has been amazing because day after I used to love just getting after it in the weight room. I did long run, long lift, heavy lift, and bullpen day would be an explosive lift. I'd be beating it up even more. And then by day 3 and 4, I was out of commission. And just trying to get it back for pitch day. So I'm loving the high-low model, and it's allowing me to take care of a lot of the other things that I need to take care of.
Absolutely. It's funny. We have a saying, everybody's invincible until they're not. Like, most people don't realize that until they're in their mid-30s, and you're talking about at age 21. So it speaks volumes to there's a guy, Dan John, in our industry, and he said the goal is to always keep the goal as the goal. Like, you're there to play baseball at a high level, not to be a weight room rock star or set any endurance records or anything like that.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. And that's where it took off for me this year. And like I said, last year, always thinking that just because I ate well and I was in the weight room that I would never get hurt. But once you get hurt, you get that feeling of, I gotta switch something up.
Absolutely. What about the day of a game? So I know tomorrow you're pitching at noon, so a little bit of an atypical one, but walk me through what happens for a 7:00 game over the course of the day as it begins.
I like to get up a little earlier. I still like to get my sleep, obviously, so still aim for 8 to 9 hours that night, but I like to get up a little earlier and get moving. I feel like if I sit around all day and do nothing, I just can't wake up. It turns into one of those lazy day feelings, and you can't do it. So I like to get up, and whatever that might be, if I got some errands to run, or clean the house, something, just to get moving. But I try and eat as much as I can in the morning because as the day goes on, I'm just not concerned with eating. I wouldn't say I have an overly nervous stomach. Like, I'm not throwing up or anything before an outing, but obviously it's not on my mind. So I try and eat as much as I can and as good as I can in the morning to be able to hold that later. But most of the day is spent doing something pretty easy going, other than getting out of the house and trying to do something in the morning. I'm little things. I'll play a little guitar, or I'll watch my show or something like that until it's time to go to the field. And I get there about 3:30 or 4 for a 7 o'clock game. And I've actually been hopping on the bike quick when I first get there. Again, just to get moving, roll out a little bit, feel like my day has begun. And then I'll get something else to eat. That's usually only 2 meals on start day is about all I can handle before a game. So I'll try and eat again, and then I got about an hour or so until I have to meet with our catcher and our coaches to go over the lineups and what our plan's going to be, and little things like that. So meet with them, and then I go to the training room to get a little stretch, heat up, and then go back to the weight room, do my activation stuff, so my shoulder activation, hips, stuff like that. And then I like to head out usually about 35 minutes before a game, run a little bit on the line, and get throwing.
Absolutely. All right. So now we're going to go to kind of the lightning round. This is the fun part. And sometimes it's not true lightning. It's lightning on my end because I asked the question. All right. So we share some common music interest. And I learned about this through Ryan Flaherty. It was one day, I think you were in late to lift or something like that. It was like a Friday afternoon at 3:30, and I was lifting, and Flaherty was like just about to head out, and he's like, Soroka loves this stuff. It was like, it might have been like some Slipknot or some Mudvayne or Hatebreed, but like, so you're a nice guy, but you don't hesitate to go to a really dark place with your musical selections when you want to crush big weights. So 2 things. First, do you listen to that stuff before you pitch, or is that only a weight room thing?
I do, to a point, and some stuff I have a limit to how hard it gets, and I think I got a label just because they'll hear one song that's pretty hard and they assume I like it all. But I learned that I can't do the real hard stuff before I pitch, because then I go out there with too much anger and I'm tight. I'm in fight mode as opposed to pitch mode. So I like to tone that down just a little bit.
All right.
But yeah, weight room, let's crank it up. Let's go.
All right. So give us some overlooked, high quality, angry music that people wouldn't know about.
I think there's some Alter Bridge.
All right.
And I know people are gonna say this, but some of the harder Nickelback is all bad.
I was literally that was my next question. I said, this is your chance in a very public platform to publicly defend your Nickelback advocacy. So state your case. Go for it. You got a minute.
Yeah, I mean, there's sides of Nickelback that weren't played, and they caught a lot of heat for a couple of their big songs that got overplayed on the radio. Photograph, Rockstar, little things like that. But on that same album, you have Side of a Bullet, which is arguably one of the harder songs you could ever really hear. And they go hand in hand with Shinedown as well. Shinedown really only gets play for a lot of their more radio-friendly songs. But if you really want to get after it, Shinedown, Alter Bridge, even some Creed, to me, isn't all bad.
That's a throwback.
Yeah, I've been really into actually one Danish metal band called Volbeat.
Yes, absolutely.
They are kind of making a resurgence. They're huge over there.
Yeah,
they're playing Metallica.
Yeah, is it Dutch, or where are they from?
Denmark.
Denmark. All right, there you go.
Yeah, so they they have a different sound. They're almost a little rockabilly in them.
All right.
But they have a different sound, and that's one that I love to go to. But I like to stay away from the more scream stuff.
Yeah.
I can't get into that. It still needs to sound melodic. It still needs to sound like music, because I am a music fan too.
Absolutely.
I will listen to Kings of Leon, all the Pearl Jam, all the traditional bands as well.
I'd say we're very similar, and I think we can both commiserate that today's modern hip hop is underwhelming when it comes on the radio in the weight room. Are you with me on it?
Yeah, I can't handle it. I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's just to me. I need some sort of when I'm in the weight room. I need some sort of tension or I don't want to say anger. That makes me sound like an angry person. But I need something. I need something aggressive. I think that's a better term to put it in, whether it's even then the 90s hip hop, there's some aggressive 90s hip hop that gets you up. But today's stuff
it's
just
not
doesn't
just
do it.
talking. They don't announce themselves at the start of a song.
No, I can't. I
All
can't
right.
do the stuff today. It takes a while for me.
All right. So, what advice would you give to a teenage Mike Soroka?
Oof. I really, and this is something that I pride myself on, was trying to have as few regrets as possible. And that for me is it goes back to being able to say, I don't know if I'd change a thing. Obviously some things where I'd pay attention a little more in school. That would have been one thing for me. I think my focus was set elsewhere for a lot of it. But I was lucky to be able to go to a school that essentially taught myself throughout high school, to be able to move at my own pace with baseball travel and all that kind of stuff. But, if one thing, it would have been to take school a little more seriously, because I felt like I could have hit a learning curve with, being able to learn things from books, until I really didn't start doing until this last off season. I was trying to get back into reading, and I think I was always just hard headed because, they sat you down and said, you have to read this book. And I said, well, I don't want to read that book, just to be a little rebellious. But I wish I'd taken pride in school a little more. Some things that could have opened up doors elsewhere. That's all.
Awesome, man. There's a saying I just heard from the founder of AngelList. He said, "Read what you love until you love to read."
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
That's one thing that's come a long ways for me last year.
Attaboy. All right, what's more important, stuff or command?
Ooh. Obviously, a lot of people are going to want me to say command. And I think without command, you can't be good. But I feel like stuff is also undervalued from guys with elite command.
Yep.
I feel like just because he's not blowing up the radar, people think that Kyle Hendricks doesn't have stuff.
Oh, he's got elite stuff.
Exactly. And that's where I don't think a lot of people truly understand is they classify him as Greg Maddux, and they say, okay, Greg Maddux was command. That's how he got his strikeouts. That's how he got his stuff. And I say, okay, yes, but nobody had a two-seam that moved like that. Yep. And he also had a really, really good curveball.
People forget also he threw really hard when he came up. Maddux actually had a really good velocity.
Yeah, exactly. And it's people don't quite understand that just because the velocity isn't exactly the same doesn't make stuff good. So I feel like that's kind of a loaded question depending on how you look at it, because I feel like all big leaguers have good stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just constant across the board, but I think what separates is command. So it depends on how you want to look at it. If you don't know what you're doing with your stuff, you're never going to be that successful.
Stuff gets you there. Command keeps you there.
Yeah, I'd say that's a much more fair assessment. And stuff's going to get you looks, but it's not going to make or break things if your stuff isn't considered absolutely elite. If you could command the ball and get outs, you're going to move as well. But the combination of both of them is what makes pitchers elite.
All right, favorite teammate of all time and why? This is a tough one, so you can pick a couple if you want to.
Yeah, I haven't exactly had too much time with a bunch of different guys because the same organization I came up with. But for me, my guy that I'll always go to is Colby Allard. He and I came up very much the same. And our mental attitude on the mound is very similar. We see a lot of things that in different lights that, when you kind of get that thought in your head that pops into your mind about something funny or someone did something or said something that you thought was interesting. I know he's thinking the same thing. So I've always been able to relate to him on that level. And, he's a guy that I've been able to learn from as well. But I think right now it's got to be Ryan McCann.
I was going to say, I figured he was going to be in the discussion.
Yeah, he's everybody says it, and it's all we heard when he first signed back here, and how much so everybody says, wow, you're gonna love BMAC, he's amazing, and you're kind of thinking, yeah, I'm sure, but how amazing. And once you get a good feel for who he is every single day and how he's the same guy, and how he's able to flip a switch, really, because he's a competitor. He competes with the best of them when it matters. I mean, when it's in there. And I think that's the look that he's got from people that watch him play baseball, is that he's just intense. He's this. He wants to win. He'll do everything to win. And ultimately, that's the best teammate you can have, is a guy that will run through walls for you. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt with him. But when it's time to take it easy, take a bus ride, or get on the plane, he's the one generating all the laughs. He's the one out there. He's able to have fun with everybody. You can tell he doesn't treat people differently just because of where they are. Everybody's a teammate to him, and that's ultimately what's brought us together this year, I feel like. And without him, we're a very different team.
Absolutely. All right, last question, and I'm actually excited to hear your answer. What pitchers do you like to watch, and why?
My guy is Max Scherzer. Mm-hmm. He's been the guy over the last few years, I guess, to where he's been just kind of on a different level, in a different headspace than a lot of pitchers. Mm-hmm. Kershaw was obviously one of the first to be able to maintain that intensity and be good every single day for so many years. And he was always a lot of fun to watch. But I think Max just took it to another level. Yeah. Because one thing that I heard this year that really made sense to me, and it's basically saying, all right, if you're navigating lineup, you're navigating, the course of a game, you have 7-8 innings, 110 pitches. How many of those pitches are you complete intent with? Mm-hmm. And the goal is every single one of them. And he's the guy that emulates that to a T. Mm-hmm. He's the guy that, it doesn't mean that he's trying to throw every fastball as hard as he can. Mm-hmm. But he decides what he wants to do with that pitch, and he doesn't look back. Yeah. You can see that. And I think that's what messes with a lot of hitters, is that he's just working on another level. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately the level that I want to get to. Yeah. That's the one that everybody sees and says, wow, even on his days, you don't know when he's feeling it, and being able to talk to him and talk about, I was feeling this on this day, and says, wow, didn't show it, Yeah. Little things like that the hitters are going up there almost with an attitude that, you know what, maybe I'll just try tomorrow. And that's something that you get to as a pitcher that very few have. And that sounds like what Pedro Martinez had, or Randy Johnson. It was just guys just didn't.
You guys got to train a lot together this spring in January and February at CSP. Did you get a chance to talk to him very much?
Not too much. No, I think a lot of our schedules were a little separate, but I got to at least see the way that he approaches every single day. Yeah, and you can tell that he understands the value of being the same guy every single day. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people imagine and think of what it would be like to be in a situation with, he's the ace of aces, mm-hmm. A guy with a whole ton of money, a good life, objectively. Yeah. But for him, what he takes pride in is being him every single day and ultimately trying to get better. He's trying to get better just like anybody else. He's not just trying to stick and maintain. And I think in some respects he is getting better, which is scary. Yeah. That's where you see what the run he went on. I think it was last month.
It was June.
While probably dealing with, whatever it was, rhomboid or lower trap. that's incredible. And that's something that's somebody that if anybody's got it figured out, it's him. And he's admitting that he doesn't have it figured out.
Yeah.
And that's what goes a long ways, and that's what keeps you humble.
Yeah, and it piggybacks a little bit on some of the stuff we talked about earlier. Is actually during the broadcast, I think it was actually last night's game, one of the Braves beat reporter read a quote from the All-Star game where he talked about loving to face Freddie Freeman from Freddie Freeman's The Best. And you always want to compete against the best because it brings the best out in who you are. And you literally just said that, 45 minutes ago, and you're talking about playing against, pro players down in, your trip to the U.S. with Team Canada. Like there's something to be said about seeking out challenges and, and even putting yourself in a position where failure is a very real possibility.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's one point that you get to, and you realize that even when you're overmatched, you say, okay, so what? He's supposed to beat me, and if he does, I don't care. And you realize that when you're in situations where you're facing the best, you want to show them what you have. And for me, that was a situation with Miguel Cabrera, my first big league camp, I guess 2 years ago, and realizing that, all right, I'm coming after you. And he sees that too. And to get that little acknowledgement when I think I put two of my best pitches right on the black on the outside corner, and to kind of get that look from him that, I see you getting after it. That's what means the most. And, he doesn't want to see somebody just give in just because of who he is. He wants competition too.
Absolutely.
So I feel like if you're always out there, and you want the best, that's ultimately when you're going to rise to be the best.
That's awesome, man. That's a good thing to wrap up on. So folks can find you. It's at Mike_Soroka28 on Twitter. It's at Mike_Soroka_ on Instagram. Thanks so much for doing this, man. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot too. So it was great.
Me too. Always fun with you, Eric, no matter what it is.
Nice. I'm glad we recorded this one. We've had enough podcast conversations that didn't become podcasts. So best of luck the rest of the way, man. And thank you for taking the time.
Okay. Thank you so much, Eric. Anytime.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.